All right. Hello. Welcome, everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started. We know that we're going to have some folks joining us throughout the presentation, and we know not everyone can stay for the whole time. Everything will be recorded today and shared out after the presentation. So we will get started here in just a moment. So the agenda today, we're really excited to have Eric and Devin Fan with us today. They're going to be presenting and talking about their 2022 Red Clover winning book, Barnabus Project, and other books and their process and all of that good stuff. So we're really excited to have them with us. If you have questions for them, please put it in the chat. If you're not seeing the chat, you can try to see if you can find it. It should appear on the right side, but you might have to select it first. And then you can also try leaving and rejoining, could be a potential thing. But we will also, when we get to that point of the Q&A, we can have you raise your hand too. There's a reaction at the toolbar, so you should be able to raise your hand, and we could also will help you turn on your camera so you can ask questions. And then after that, from 2 o'clock to 3:30, we'll have the Red Clover Committee will be presenting the 2022-2023 award nominee list and related programming ideas. And then we'll have time for Q&A at the end of that session as well. So we will go ahead and get started. We are really excited to have Devin and Eric Fan with us today. Devin Fan is an artist, poet, and youth worker who has a passion for nature, adventure, and kung fu. The Barnabas Project is his first children's book and marks the first time he has worked with his brothers Terry and Eric to write and illustrate a picture book together. Eric Fan received his formal art training at the Ontario College of Art and Design in Ontario, along with his brothers. His work is a blend of traditional and contemporary techniques using ink, graphite mixed with digital. The Night Gardener was their widely acclaimed debut picture book. Thank you, Eric and Devin. We're really happy to have you here. Take it. It's all yours.
Thank you so much, Jonathan.
Thanks, Jonathan.
I'm going to begin. What does it mean? Said Barnabas, looking up at the strange red stamp. It means you're going to be recycled, said Pip. That's what happens to all failed projects. You'll be fluffier afterwards, offered Pip kindly, and you'll be cuter, and your eyes will probably be bigger. I like having small eyes, said Barnabas, although he wasn't even sure anymore. Barnabas slumped in his jar. He wasn't fluffy enough, and his eyes were beady, but he liked himself, just the way he was. What if, after he was recycled, peanuts and cheese were no longer his favorite foods? What if his friends didn't recognize him after? What if he no longer cared about green trees and mountains lit with their own stars? We need to escape, said Barnabas suddenly. Welcome, everyone. My name's Devin Fan. It's my pleasure to be here with my brother, Eric, today. Before we even get started, I have to say thank you so much, not only to the Red Clover Committee, but to all of the teachers and librarians out there who organized such an undertaking. It was amazing to me to learn that over 70,000 children voted. I've never heard of such a astounding event to get that many people involved in reading and enjoying books, which I think is the most joyous thing about it. But we were so overwhelmed and touched to find out that our book, The Barnabas Project, was chosen. It meant so much to us all. So thank you so much for that. And then we were invited to take part in the Vermont Golden Dome and Red Clover Book Award Conference, the title of which I think is just amazing. Actually, it reminds me of a 1970s Shaw Brothers Kung Fu movie title. So that appealed to me for its own reasons. But we're so happy to be here today. Even more than that, what I'm most excited about, though, is the ability to talk to you. Why is that? Other than the fact that I'm sure you're all lovely people, is because we all have the same job in one way or another, and that's connecting with people. So my day job actually is that I'm a youth worker at the Native Youth Resource Center here in Toronto. That's what I do during the day, and that job is connecting with people. But just like yours, whether you're a teacher or librarian or working in some way in the community or with children, or for all of us really, it's that idea of opening doors to other worlds for people, opening doors to other opportunities. What does that have to do with the Barnabas Project? Well, Barnabas is an adventure story at its heart, and that's because we all grew up loving Sinbad and Robin Hood and all kinds of different adventure movies. So that stuff and is very, very close to all of our hearts. And those are some of the kinds of ways I grew up. Our dad always told us stories like that. So grew up loving those kinds of stories. I know kids very much connect with that. So luckily, even though it was a pandemic, which was so hard on children and families everywhere, we were able to connect virtually with kids all around the world and read our story to them. And so I know that kids connected so much with that idea of adventure, but as well of the idea of these little creatures stuck in their little bell jars. So I'm luckily enough, I have Bumble Bear here. I hope you can see him. Funnily enough, this little guy was made by Dina Sefferling. It was Terry and Eric got him for me for my birthday present. And Dina is actually the illustrator of Eric's brand new book, which just launched yesterday, Night Lunch. So if you haven't heard of it or haven't had a chance to look at it, I strongly encourage you. It's my new favorite book. I absolutely adore this book. It's just beautiful. Eric's not going to like that. He's going to get embarrassed, but you should definitely go check it out. But that's a sidetrack. So Barnabas is an adventure story about our little creatures in their little jars here and how they escape. But one of the things that I found so fascinating, talking to kids all around the world about the story and seeing their projects and hearing what they got from the book, was that it was the themes of the book that actually really kind of resonated with them and led to the most interesting and amazing discussions that we ended up having with so many kids and teachers from around the world. And some of those questions that get raised from the book are, what does it mean to be perfect? And who among us kind of feels that way? I think that strikes a balance. I think it strikes a nerve with so many people because so many of us feel like failed projects and identify with that idea. So just like little Barnabas here, maybe our eyes are too small, or like him, we're not fluffy enough, or we're not tall enough, or smart enough, or pretty enough, or all those other kind of judgments that we feel from outside, from society. Or if you're a child or youth, or even an adult today, Instagram and TikTok and things like that is almost like a sea of perfect pets that you're surrounded by all the time. So I don't know how many of you have children of your own, or nephews or nieces, or people that you care about. I have 3, and to me, they're all perfect. But I know that the rest of the world won't necessarily see them or treat them that way. But instead, we have a tendency to put labels on things, or put them in some kind of box or a bell jar. And we see Barnabas right off the bat is labeled as a failure. And one of the incredible discussions I've had with kids is that idea of labeled by who? Who is labeling Barnabas a failure? Who labels as a failure? It's certainly not by anyone that cares about him. In this case, the green rubber suits, who are kind of the villains in our story, are the ones that put the failed stickers on all the failed projects. They deem them as failures. And they do know something about them. They know that Barnabas's favorite food is cheese and peanuts. They know what his habitat needs to be and his measurements and all those other things. But what they don't know about him is that he's courageous and loyal and takes care of his friends, and he's resourceful. So that's what I like to talk about with the kids, is what qualities they think are most important there. I know that, excuse my cough, I'm recovering. I'm pretty familiar with that feeling of being a failed project. I kind of grew up feeling that way in many ways. Growing up mixed race in the 60s and 70s was not the same as it is now. Certainly, it was not an easy thing then. So I guess Eric and I have always joked it's no coincidence that Barnabas himself ended up the hero of our story, ended up being half mouse and half elephant. Actually, for all kinds of different reasons, and I know everyone has their own story, my self-esteem had reached such a low point that at one point in my life, I went through a couple of years with barely talking to anyone at all. How does that connect to this story? Well, for the past more than 20 years now as a youth worker, I've been working with failed projects more or less every day in human form and listening to their stories and struggles, most of which were much more difficult than anything I can ever imagine going through. And that's who our story is about those failed projects. So actually, for me, although I'm certainly glad that you joined to hear us about our book, and Eric's going to talk to you more about that whole creative process. For me, it's not actually so important whether or not you've read our book at all, because what I'm kind of here to talk to you more today about is how to reach those real life failed projects that are in all of our kind of collective care. So how do we recognize a failed project in the first place? That's not as easy as it may seem, because just like our creatures in the story, who all look totally different, people are all very different. And people who are struggling with things can also look very different. They may end up like my whole family was, being extremely introverted and quiet and hard to communicate with. Or they could be angry, which is some of the youth that I work with, but who are still struggling with the same things. And I think once you start to look, and I'm sure those of you who are working in libraries and schools and everywhere else will know that when you take the time to look around, you'll see that they're actually everywhere. And in many cases, they're easy to miss because they are so quiet sometimes. And I know that's true for a lot of the youth that come into our drop-in. So those are the ones I want to talk about reaching out to. One of the things that I've learned over years and years and years of working with kids and adults and children and youth from all different backgrounds is a great secret, and that is that everyone wants to be engaged in one way or another. Everyone does. Everyone wants to tell their story. I'm going to share with you a little story, excuse me again, about Emma, who was a youth that came to our drop-in and was honestly one of the absolute most introverted and quiet I've ever met in my life. She almost kind of came into the drop-in like a mouse with her head down and disappeared into the corner, into her phone, and just wouldn't talk to anyone, seemed incapable of talking to anyone. But I recognized that because I had been there myself. So it took me a very long time, but eventually I was able to get her to open up to me using some of the things I'm going to talk to you about, some of the kind of tips and tricks. And when she was finally able to open up to me, and when she did, she went from someone who had not spoken a word to anyone in the drop-in and weeks to, no exaggeration, I sat with her for 4 hours straight, and she told me her entire life story, which turned out to be unbelievably difficult, the things that she went through. So it was no surprise after hearing her story why she had so much trouble communicating and why she had so many self-esteem issues. But she did have an incredible story to tell. And after that, and it again took some time, but she eventually went to participating in programs and then leading her own mocks and making workshops and all kinds of other things afterwards that were so valuable to what she actually had to share with the world. The reason I'm sharing that with you is because those are some of the stories that we miss when failed projects don't end up having anyone show them that there's something other than failed. We miss an unbelievable amount. So the next thing I'm going to talk about is how we reach these failed projects and how we actually kind of break through and help them to see what is not failed about themselves. The first one, I would almost say the most important one, is to don't give up. So I can almost guarantee you that if someone is in a state where they're not able to communicate with people anymore, they've already given up on themselves, and probably they feel like everyone else has already given up on them. Not just that, they're expecting you to give up on them because that's their experience. And just by not giving up. So sometimes I know we always worry, are we doing the right thing, or do we have the right approach? But the most important thing is to be just persistent. And I will tell you that whether it's a child or youth or adults or anyone else in your life, what people respond to is whether or not you're genuine or not. And if you genuinely want to reach and communicate with someone, that's all that matters. Everyone will have their own way of doing that. There are no special tricks to that. I will give you one or two little tips that I have found over years and years have been super helpful for me and taken some time to learn. The first one is to ask sort of fun and easy questions. And this is one I use all the time at the drop-in, especially when it's with youth who just aren't able to communicate and are super awkward. And questions would be examples of, if you could only eat one kind of food or cuisine for the rest of your life, what would it be? Questions that almost anyone can answer. Think of something simple. Excuse me. If they're not able to answer, and I've had lots of situations where youth don't feel comfortable answering, they'll still just stare down at the floor, and then I'll answer the question. So I'll say, well, for me, it would be salads, because I could have so many different kinds of salads, and I could add to, and just have a conversation with myself, which I've gotten comfortable doing. One thing I noticed, because I did this a lot with Emma, which is not her real name, so don't worry, when she first came into the drop-in, was that she later referenced stuff that I had talked about when I was basically just talking to myself. So even though she wasn't communicating with me at that point, she was still listening. And sometimes listening can be a way for someone to engage back with you and participate even when they're not able to speak. The other one, I'll say this one is equally important as the persistent one, and is one of the keys, is to be happy to see them. So for those children and youth that are coming in to your library or class or whatever environment you're working in, just be happy to see them. And I know that can be hard when you yourself have maybe had a tired or difficult day, or you're not feeling well, but it's the most important gift you can give to someone, because for that person, especially if they're someone who's angry or not good at communicating or is not used to speaking to people, I almost guarantee you no one is ever happy to see them. So even if it's just the littlest thing, when you say, oh, hey, I'm so glad you made it today, it's so great to see you. Even if it's as simple as that, I almost guarantee you, if they're in that situation in life, no one has said to that to them all week long until you did. So just those little tiny things can make a huge difference. Those are the little things that help you build trust with people, so that maybe you can eventually talk to them and get to know their story. The other thing is to remember something about them and follow up. So this is something I use all the time. When someone shares something with you, even if it's something small, like that they have to leave early from your library, or they're going to a basketball game to play, is to follow up with them the next time you see them and ask them how their game was. Again, for you and I, that may seem like the littlest thing and just small talk, but for them, it shows them that you remembered something about them, and that you took the time to ask them about it. And that can be huge for someone. Everyone is passionate about something. So I bet if you think about it, you can think about things that you're passionate about. We all have all kinds of different hobbies. I have too many to mention, but everyone is passionate about something. Even the quietest, shyest person, even the person that only seems to play video games, everyone has some kind of passion. And that can be a window. And you can find that a way to break the ice and actually engage and find out more important things about someone. And also to maybe help encourage their passion, because if you're working in an environment like a library, I happen to know from working at the youth center that we work with our local libraries, that libraries are actually providing all kinds of incredible opportunities and resources. And sometimes just by kind of keying in and finding out what someone is interested in, then you can actually help them to pursue that. And that kind of thing can be life-changing. So if you find out their interest is in music, and you have some connection to music programs, it doesn't matter what it is. Just you taking the time to find out what they're interested in, talk about it, it's that little window. You don't have to know about it yourself. For example, I know nothing about K-pop and never wanted to, but I ended up learning everything about it from this one youth. That was her obsession. So she was showing me videos. I ended up becoming someone an expert in it. And that was great. For me, I learned something about something I didn't know. For her, she was able to share something. Everything else she could not talk about. She was completely silent. But that one thing she could talk endlessly about because she was this world expert on it. So that helps break the ice as well. And usually people will feel comfortable talking about something they're passionate about. Some of you may feel like you don't have that many resources wherever you are, and that there's draws for children and youth to go do other things. And it's impossible to compete with them. And that's one of my final secrets, is that you are by far the most important resource at wherever it is you're working. So what I mean by that is, if you're that person that's happy to see them, if you're that person that wants to speak to them, if you're that person that wants to learn the story, that will have a much greater impact, I promise you, than any kind of newfangled thing, whether it's a PS5 or anything else. I remember a time when I used to work with my colleague at a place called The Shack, which was a youth drop-in center that had no running water, no bathroom, no heat, half the time no electricity. So we were playing Monopoly by candlelight. But that place was packed all the time because the youth knew that was the place where it was like a family and where they were going to come, where people were happy to see them. That was the reason they came there, where people wanted to see them for who they are. Much more important, we had nothing, but it was always busy. So you can be that resource for people. And if you're that will make people want to come to your library or school or whatever it is that you're involved in. So why go to all this trouble? For me, because honestly, I believe it's a question of life or death. And that's why I always try to take opportunities when I can speak to librarians and teachers to say that it's about life and death for some of these young people, whether they get noticed and heard, and whether or not they can kind of take that failed sticker off of themselves. In a dramatic way, it can lead to people dealing with self-harm and everything else. But in another way as well, you can think about all the stories and all the incredible inventions and creativity and books and music that people are not going to be able to invent if we don't recognize them and give them a voice to do so. Because I promise you, just because someone is not talking doesn't mean they have nothing to say. So that's kind of what I see as our sacred responsibility, is to try to find those stories and help give people a voice. Because in the end, in one way or another, we're all failed projects. And just like the failed projects in Barnabas, we all need to stick together. So thank you so much. I know that was maybe not exactly quite what you were expecting, but I was happy nonetheless to have you as my audience. And I hope you found some of it useful or entertaining in some way. I'm now going to hand it off to my esteemed brother, Eric, who's going to talk about the creative process from a slightly different lens. So thank you again for listening. And Eric, the stage is yours.
Thanks, Devin. That was great. Yeah, so I'm going to talk about how we sort of got into picture books. We had kind of an unusual path into picture books. But I'm also going to talk about sort of the other side of the ledger, not as an educator or youth worker, but as one of those kids growing up who felt like a failed project. And like Devin mentioned, we were all very shy. I was painfully shy in school, and I wanted to be invisible all the time. And that to me was my failure. Retrospectively, I can sort of look back and see that being introverted isn't really a failure. It's one of the things that actually probably drove me into being an artist and a writer. Art was my refuge, and my imaginative world became like the turtle shell that I could retreat into. And that's kind of where stories come from. So sometimes the things we perceive as a failure, they're not a failure. They're just something that's that's a bit off the beaten track, or it's not the sort of accepted standard in society. But it can be a positive thing. It can bring positive things. One of the ironies about being a picture book author and illustrator is that you suddenly find yourself having to do public speaking engagements, which is something I spent my entire life in mortal fear of, and it's still something I struggle with. And just to share a little story, the first presentation Terry and I had to give after we had a book published was at Book Expo, and it was in front of about 100 librarians, our publisher, booksellers, and I had an anxiety attack on stage, and the presentation went terribly. And at the end of it, it was a raised stage, and there was a staircase on one side, but I was in such a state of anxiety. I was looking for the fastest way to get off the stage, and in my weird state of mind, I thought I would hop off the front of the stage. And it was, so I hopped down, and it was much higher than I expected. So I landed, went into like a barrel roll on the ground, and then sort of popped to my feet like Willy Wonka. And there was no applause. There was stunned silence. So there's no stage today, so at least I can't, I won't be jumping off any stages, but so hopefully this will go a little better. So I have a little presentation to share. And so Terry and I, for as long as I can remember, Terry and I like to write stories and draw them. Our main preoccupation when we were really little was dinosaurs. And our first collaboration together was actually a picture book that we drew in crayons called Many Years Ago, that our mom helped us write out and put together. And even this simple first book taught us something about storytelling. It taught us that a story needed a beginning and a middle and an end. It needed some excitement. If you can throw in a battle between a Triceratops and a T-Rex, that's always a good thing. And we have the dramatic ending where the dinosaurs die off. And I guess really the most important message, by sort of working on this book with us, our mom, and helping us put it together, the message that she imparted to us at that age was that however small and humble, our stories still mattered, and they were worth telling. And the stories in general mattered and were worth preserving. And so art remained a passion of ours as we got older. And like Devin talked about the importance of a great teacher, in middle school, I was so shy that I just wanted to be invisible. I sat at the back of the class, but I had one teacher, Mr. Halushko, who was my favorite teacher. He was the first teacher to tell me I was a good writer, and he would actually read out my stories in class, which was mortifying to me, but also it was exciting. And he would hang up my pictures in the display case outside in the hallway. And he was also the first person to tell me about art college, this magical place where every class was my favorite class, which was art. And that planted the seed about going to art college. So after graduating, I did end up attending the Ontario College of Art and Design, along with Terry and Devin, who both attended as well. And so I'll just pause for a minute, and I'd like to say that after attending art college, we all made a smooth transition into careers as professional artists, but sometimes life's a little messier than that. We spent many decades, Terry and I, working in jobs about as far away from art as you can imagine. Terry worked in a hospital pharmacy, and I delivered construction equipment. And I think what sustained me through that long winter of unhappiness were books and art. I still like to draw in my spare time when I could, and I still like to write. There's a quote from a book I just read called In the Wild Light by Jeff Zentner. And one of the characters at one point says that fear wants to make your life small. And I'd argue that books want to make your life bigger. And they open up your imagination to possibilities that you wouldn't have thought about. And they really gave me the mental scaffolding to imagine a life that was unconstrained by my current circumstances. And so I kept working towards being a writer, being an artist. And it was always in my spare time after work, which I would sometimes come home after an exhausting shift. So that sort of precluded me having any kind of real life. But that didn't really matter to me because I always thought that life was one stop down on the. I felt like I was waiting on a platform for this subway that would arrive someday and take me to the next stop, which would be life, my life. Unfortunately, life has a way of marching on as you wait tirelessly on that platform. But sometimes a train will come along that doesn't seem to be going in the right direction. But if you get on that train anyway, sometimes it detours and takes you to the destination you were hoping for all along. And that's kind of what happened to us. I read an article about a new website called Threadless, which was, for those who don't know, is a t-shirt website. It's open to anyone. It's one of the first crowdsourced websites, so anyone could contribute designs. And there are no barriers to entry, no gatekeepers, other than the community itself, which would vote on designs, and the most popular designs would be printed and sold on the website. So I started eagerly submitting designs, most of which failed miserably. The community could be quite ruthless in their critiques, but that was kind of the resistance I needed. We all sort of want our art to be viewed through the lens of someone that loves us, but the fact is it's actually more useful to have your art viewed through a dispassionate lens. That really sort of teaches you more than your family and friends telling you you're great. And so one day, and Terry started submitting designs at this point too, and we had a little bit of competition going. We even collaborated on a few designs together. And meanwhile, a turning point was I broke my hand at work while I was unloading a heavy piece of construction equipment. And it was a pretty bad break, and I kind of worried that I wouldn't be able to draw properly after my hand healed. And that was kind of a wake-up call, because here I was doing full cast. I kept drawing, and I drew one design called the Healing Menagerie. This is actually the original submission with the score, and it got 2.85 out of 5, which was actually considered a good. Anything above 2.5 out of 5 was considered a good score. And by some miracle, it was printed, and I felt like I'd won the lottery. It was the first piece of artwork I'd ever been paid actual money for, and by this time I was 40 years old. And turning points in your life usually only become apparent looking back, and I can definitely see this as a turning point because it spurred me on, and I felt like I'd found this magic key that had opened a door, if only by a crack. And here are some of our other submissions from that time, just to give you sort of an idea of our style, what we were doing. One thing I found, and it was partly from looking at other artists who were successful on the site, is a lot of the designs that were successful, they weren't simply just aesthetically pleasing, they're also sort of narratively driven, where they seem to tell a story. And I think if there's a thread that connects our t-shirt designs, it's that they do have that narrative quality. And here's some of Terry's t-shirts and some of my designs from the same time period. And at this point, our agent, Kirsten Hall, had seen some of our work online and approached us about representing us. She had just started a new agency called Catbird and was looking for new artists. And one of the first questions she asked is whether we had any picture book ideas. So we actually went back. This was a collaboration we had done on Threadless. It was printed as a shirt called The Night Gardener. And we looked back on that design, and we always felt there was something about this design in particular that had a larger story sort of in the margins. Sometimes you create an image and it's almost like it's trying to tell you a story, and you just need to be a good listener. So we sent her this image of the Night Gardener and told her we thought we could build a story around it. So she encouraged us to do that. And our process for creating stories has remained much the same to this day. One of the most daunting aspects of writing a story is when you're faced with that dreaded blank page. And so we substituted the blank page for an image. And we like to call it a narrative Boolean cube. And what is a narrative Boolean cube? It's an image that seems to have a concentrated version of the story in it, it has a certain narrative density. It's the old cliche about a picture tells 1,000 words, and 1,000 words is really all you need for a picture book. So we wrote an outline for the story, and we created a bunch of sample illustrations. Here are some sketches we submitted along with our manuscript that I managed to dig up. So Kirsten pitched the idea to Simon Schuster, and to our astonishment, they made an offer. And so just when I was least expecting it, that magic subway car had abruptly changed course and had taken me to a destination that I'd been trying to reach for 30 years. And I was still delivering construction equipment at this time while all this was happening. And I knew I couldn't devote myself to working on a book while still working full time. And so on my 50th birthday, I gave my 2 weeks notice at work, and we threw ourselves into completing the book, which was The Night Gardener, our first book. And so here are some preliminary sketches we'd done as we were working on the book. It's one thing to collaborate on a T-shirt together or to do a book about dinosaurs and crayon, but doing a picture book was a whole other order, more in magnitude, more daunting. And so we were kind of learning on the fly. And the one thing you do when you're creating a picture book is you do what's called a rough dummy. And so this is the rough dummy we did for The Night Gardener, which I think there was still a few versions after this one, but this was getting closer to the final story. And Terry and I were also kind of learning on the fly how to collaborate together. One of the questions we get asked more than any other is how we work on illustrations as a partnership. And our process became to sort of divide up the workload, with each of us tackling different parts of an illustration. Luckily, we have sort of a similar aesthetic and style. And what we would do is we would each draw parts of an illustration, and then we would composite them together in Photoshop. And Photoshop's also where we color our artwork. So we'll scan pencil drawings and then color them in Photoshop. And I'll give some examples. So this is the final pencil art for the cat tree in The Night Gardener. And that's after it's colored in Photoshop. But all those characters and cats are all on their own layer, so we can move stuff around or change things after. Nothing is locked down to the illustration. And that gives us a lot of flexibility. Here's just another example from The Night Gardener. This is the dummy sketch for the dragon tree. And then the final art. And you can see this, all the characters are put in on their own layer. And so sometimes the editor will ask you to move something to make in an illustration to make room for text or for whatever, or to take things out of the gutter, which is like the middle of the illustration where the book is bound. So working like this does give us that amazing flexibility to move stuff around and alter things after, or redraw something that the other person. Terry will sometimes redraw what I've done, and I'll sometimes redraw what he's done. So it's that back and forth is sort of part of our process as well. And here's another example from Ocean Meets Sky, which is the same process, just building up everything in layers. And so after The Night Gardener was published, we actually looked back on some old other T-shirt. This is a T-shirt design that Terry had done called Ocean Meets Sky, which is what served as our springboard for Ocean Meets Sky, the book. And on the right there is a t-shirt I'd done called It Fell from the Sky. And so when you have an image like that and a title, it's already doing quite a lot of heavy lifting for you in terms of having a great visual springboard for the story. So if you're a writer, I'd recommend trying that instead of just starting with an empty page. Draw. It doesn't have to be a great drawing, just any sort of doodle to sort of spark your imagination. And that sort of brings us full circle to the Barnabas Project. It was the same process. The book actually started with one of those narrative Boolean cubes. In this case, it was also an actual Boolean cube. This is a drawing Devin did about 30 years ago, and somehow we also hung on to this drawing as well, which I had to go on a search for it one day. It took me a long time to find, but it eventually tracked it down. And when Devin showed us this little drawing of a character called Barnabas, who was half mouse and half elephant, even 30 years ago, we felt like there was a potential story idea there. We even did a rough dummy at one point, but we had no idea how to approach a publisher. And I managed to dig up these old drawings from the original rough dummy. And as rough as they are, it's still a lot of the sort of central ideas were there. And this drawing kind of amazes me how close it is actually to what the final book ended up being. And it wasn't until after Terry and I had published The Night Gardener that the pieces all finally fell into place. One day we happened to have one of our publishers, Tara Walker, over for dinner, and Terry mentioned Barnabas just off the cuff and casually gave her the sort of elevator pitch for the story. And to our surprise, she loved it, and she asked to see more. So we brought Devin on board. We started brainstorming more ideas based on that original story outline that we had created 30 years ago. And we started doing sketches, which was a lot of fun. For the first time, we had a project that all three of us could work on, which had always been a dream of ours. In the past, Devin and I had done a chapter book that we tried to get published, and we had all written screenplays together. So there's a whole history of collaboration and failures, which weren't really failures, because I think a lot of times what you perceive as a failure, you're building up that sort of base of ideas that you can draw from. And so here's some sketches. There's some sketches Devin did, some sketches I did, as we were sort of developing the story. And this was the rough dummy we made. So it's quite a bit longer than a typical children's book, which we were really happy when our publisher sort of went along with that, because that was definitely a risk to make a picture book that's almost twice as long as your standard picture book. But we felt we sort of needed it for the scope of the story, and it turned out to be a good thing. And so here's some examples of our final art drawn in pencil, which will later be scanned. And here's some more examples. And like with our other books, we drew everything separately so we could all contribute, and we would build up an illustration sort of piece by piece, almost like putting a puzzle together. And so that brings us to the end. I hope our story serves as an inspiration to all the late bloomers out there, all the people who are still waiting on the platform for that magical train to take them to the next stop. I also hope it serves as a reminder that there are spaces where even the quietest kids can grow and flourish, given just a bit of the sunlight of encouragement. So thank you all. And I will present.
Thank you both. That was really, really great. Really fantastic to hear your stories and your perspectives, and to see the art and stories come together. Really, really inspiring.
Oh, thank you.
We do have a few questions. I'm going to start with a question because as I was seeing you presenting and showing, which was really great to see the process of the art and the books coming together, and when you were showing the layers, it very much looked like animation, and I was wondering if you have done or are interested in doing animation for something like Barnabas or a separate project.
Yeah, I love animation. It's actually, and for a little while before going to art college, I actually considered going to and taking animation instead. But animation is pretty difficult. But in some ways, I kind of wish it's also a good foundation. It's such a good foundation for drawing because you have to draw the same character in motion, etc. But our process is a little bit like that. We'll do a background, and the layers above are kind of like animation cells. So we're hoping there is a company that is a studio in Toronto actually that we're in talks with about doing an animated version of Barnabas. So that'd be super cool.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah,
we would all be stoked about that.
Yeah, that would be great. I'm sure.
I'm going to Hannah, who's one on the Red Clover committee, has a couple questions. Hannah, why don't you go ahead and ask?
Oh, thanks.
Them. Yeah.
I can't stop myself from asking questions.
No. I've like it'd be easier for you to ask them.
Right. And I also read Barnabas first when it first came out and loved it, and have probably read it to my children 100 times since then. So to get to talk to you is like so exciting. So first, your overall aesthetic across all of your books is so distinctive. Like I feel like I don't often see picture books that look like what you make. And so I was wondering what your like biggest inspirations are for that particular style.
I don't know if it directly, maybe it does a little bit, but I mean, I grew up loving Murray Sendak a lot, and that maybe it's more of a mood thing, but I just like that aesthetic a lot. So I think that has found its way. And there's other artists that contemporary artists I admire a lot that I wouldn't say they have the same style, but just as far as sort of mood goes.
Awesome. Do you each have favorites among the failed projects? I saw that Devin has Bumblebear as like a little felt guy.
I have a Barnabas that was made by the same.
Yeah.
So Barnabas,
it's hard to choose favorites because we put so much kind of work into developing them all, and we actually have secret files for all of them.
Oh, do you? Do you actually have the files?
Yeah, we do.
Oh, you do? That's awesome.
Look at Barnabas.
We do, yeah.
Oh yeah, that's amazing.
Like, move them over a little, because
Does Terry have one too?
He doesn't. He should. We should get two. We should get
out of 3. All right, so you two were writing a chapter book together. Is there a future for it, or something else you're working on that?
We hope so. You never know.
I hope there's a future for it. Anything's possible.
Yeah.
What's it about?
That's such a difficult question to answer. Maybe that was the problem. We'll see. It'll have to remain a secret for now because it's still being looked at. But yeah, you'll be the first to know.
All right, so what are you working on next?
Right now we're working on actually a sequel to the Barnos Project. So.
Oh my gosh!
Amazing.
So that's a lot of fun, and that's about it. We've just sort of taking our time with that, and we have a couple other ideas percolating, but nothing set in stone.
Well, and Eric just literally, because it was only yesterday, launched his brand new book that he wrote by himself, and it was illustrated by someone else. So that's this one that I launched. So that's what he's been working
on. Yes, thanks. Was that your questions, Hannah?
Yeah, Kara can go ahead. It looks like she has one.
Oh yeah, Kara, go ahead.
Hi, Devin, thank you. And thank you, Eric. What a great presentation. And I really appreciate you speaking about those kids that just really need to be seen and listened to, and how important that is. I wanted you to know that my school, I have pre-K through second grade kids. And I remember as a person on the Red Clover committee, we had a wondering about, will our youngest kids be able to sit through a book that's this long? And I'll have you know that their eyes are absolutely glued. If they could get closer and closer to the book, they would want to do that. So thank you for knowing that even kids that are 5 years old really want to hear a full story and see how that moves along. My question for you is, how did you come up with the name Barnabas? It's an unusual name. I have never had a student named Barnabas. So who picked that? Where did it come from?
That was Devin.
That's, it's so funny because names, I've always loved naming things. We all collected marbles. I named all my marbles. I named literally everything that I have, because even my bicycles, like everything just seems to be better with a name. So I remember when I first came up with that character, it was because I had every pet imaginable and the strangest things that you could ever. I had a mud puppy pet. I had all kinds of aquariums in my room, always filled with something strange. But my dream pet was I always wanted a little elephant that I could hold in my hand. I thought that would just be the coolest pet in the whole world. And I thought, well, to make that happen, I'd have to use genetic engineering. So that's where the idea with mixing a mouse and elephant DNA came up. That's how I came up with that. And then the name just literally, after I drew him, popped into my head. And it was because I remember my wife had always mentioned to me, for some reason it stuck in my head, that the church she was christened at was called St. Barnabas on the Danforth, which is still here in Toronto. It's an old church. And I didn't know anything. I don't go to church, but I just love the name Barnabas. And I think because it sounded a little bit like Barnum and Bailey's circus, it just had this right feel to me, something about it. So when I drew that little character, I just looked at him and I said Barnabas, and that was it. That's where the name comes from. But originally it comes from my wife. Long-winded answer. Sorry.
That's awesome. I also tend to name everything like a piece of, like a rock that has googly eyes or whatever. Just like, hey, Rocky, what's up? Stephanie has a question.
Hello. My students were so happy hearing that I would get to see you today. They had some questions. One was, would you do a sequel? And the second was, would you consider making a pop-up book?
I love pop-up books. I think they're very expensive. I'm down.
Yeah, so someone, you'd need to get a paper engineer to do all the pop-ups, but yeah, pop-up books are amazing. It would be really cool. You could do a really cool one.
It's a great idea.
That would
As a
be
kid,
really
they were
cool.
my favorite. I love pop-up books.
Yeah, they're amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See, we have a few more minutes. I don't know if anyone has questions, and make sure you can, again, feel free to raise your hand and we can unmute you, and make sure I didn't miss any in the chat. Oh, Abby, go ahead.
This is probably not worth making a comment about, but I just have never met anybody who dreamed about having a tiny elephant before. That's always been my dream as well. But I go back and forth between hand-sized and then like 40 pounds, kind of like a house elephant.
That would be amazing too. respect your 40-pound decision. Yeah.
Right? So like you'd come home from work and it would like trumpet and like come and say hi to you. Anyway, I'm just
Yeah.
I was so delighted.
That's a toss-up. No,
Yeah. I
I
was just
see
so
that,
delighted to
sure.
hear you say that. So thank you for that moment of connection.
Awesome.
And there was a comment. Amanda also was asking about the animation question I asked, because sort of seeing the process of it. But she also specifically mentioned the length of the book, which came up about how the students said it was like a short movie, and like Kara was saying, and again, I think that is really a testament to the story and the imagery and everything about it, because it does. When I first saw it, I was like, that doesn't look like a picture book. Like just seeing like the how dense it is.
Yeah.
But yeah,
it
it is really compelling.
was definitely a gamble. So we're very fortunate because our publisher, Tara Walker, she's very open to taking a bit of a gamble on books. She loves her, first and foremost, she wants to make the book that it should be. So I think it was great to have
We
her.
were very lucky.
And thankfully it didn't belly flop. So
and there is a comment, just someone was commenting that they just appreciating that you're talking about, like, that your mother supported you in your early efforts.
yeah,
Just having those, or like what Devin was talking about, like if you just have somebody who is a champion for you, is there to listen, even and to, whether it's a teacher or whoever it is, someone to take interest in what you're doing, is huge.
yeah, makes
Everyone needs to be encouraged, for sure.
Yeah, and that idea, I just underlined it when you were talking, that idea that we are all failed projects. And I think even the like perfect pets are failed projects. Like they have their own, like everybody has their own thing.
Absolutely.
And even if we see, oh, that's a perfect person, a perfect project, they don't feel that way. They have insecurities.
That's
They have
exactly
their own
right.
things.
Yeah.
But it is also, when you sort of are able to embrace it, it's more interesting. Like, that's what I like about the book, is that the failed projects are way more interesting than the perfect pets. And I'm sure that
kids say that.
and
as
I'm sure
well.
that was intentional to some degree, but they're like way more interesting. You're like, yeah, those are fine, but look how cool like these other ones are.
Yeah, I think that's a good message. That sometimes it's idiosyncrasies and quote strange things about us that make people interesting. So
yes. Let's see if there are any other. Leaf, did you have a comment, question?
So what I was going to say is that an intentional Barnabas scientist that would have said those animals were more interesting and more perfect. A lot of times engineers will get slammed for their lack of personality or people skills. Maybe it's the scientists, because I didn't get into that very deep with most classes, but I said, so what are the scientists to say what's perfect? What's
right, exactly.
Yeah, that's true. Let's see, it looks like there's maybe we have let's see, yeah, Michael, me. Go ahead, Michael.
I just wanted to say thank you on behalf of about 400 kids in St. Albans, Vermont. And one of the most fascinating things, I've only been a librarian for 7 years. I've been at the same school for 20. One of the most fascinating things that happened last year with the Barnabas Project. So every year, right before school starts, we make a very special display of the Red Clover books. And from the very first moment of the first class, kids coming in where this display is prominent, they would see this book. and we were working on some other things about, fiction and nonfiction and different aspects of the library. And they would say to me immediately, when are you going to read us this book? And I said, all right. And they dictated sort of the pacing of how that went. And before I was even ready to launch into Red Clover stories, I had to read the Barnabas Project, and rightfully so. And I knew, without ever even sharing this book to the hundreds of children I get to serve, it was going to win the Red Clover Award. It was just unlike any other experience I'd ever had. And I just have to say thank you so much.
Thank you so much. That's so amazing to hear.
Yeah, and love your stories and love the message that you gave us as well in both talks, the process and people, relationships, never giving up, determination. So thank you so much for your art, your story, and for your time today.
Thanks so much.
Thank you very much.
Say hi to the kids first.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Michael. And I think that's the perfect place to end. I feel the same way. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us, and being thoughtful about and sort of being able to share your own experiences of, being the kid who is sort of feels unseen or wants to be unseen. And I think that even for people who are maybe a little bit more outgoing, like we all have moments where we feel that and feel unseen. And so just really appreciate you taking the time and coming in and talking to us today.
Thanks so much, Jonathan.
Thanks.
Yeah, it was our pleasure. So yeah, thank you so much again. It's so lovely to see so many people on here. Thanks for the questions and just thanks for being a part. We really, really appreciate it. It's a great experience.
Thank you.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. All the best, everyone.
Thanks. Okay. All right, well, that was awesome. And get us all excited to talk about more books. So I am going to just very quickly do a real quick overview of the book award of Red Clover. Some of you are new to it. Some of you are more familiar with it than others. You've done it with your students. So just talk about the process, and then we'll introduce the committee and have them talk about this year's list. So the Red Clover Book Award is designed for children kindergarten through 4th grade. And the Children's Choice this award has been handed out since 1997. And each year, committee members work tirelessly to read as many picture books as possible published in one year. And this year, they've been reading. They are currently reading books published in 2022, and they're working on the new list, which will be which they will finish up in spring of 2023. So they are working all over the place. They're presenting today about books that they read a while ago. So the students in K through 4, they read the nominated books. Awesome books that the committee puts together. They read during the school year, and then they get to vote, which is really one of the amazing things about this particular about all of the book awards in Vermont. Again, this year, the students will be reading the books from the 2022-2023 nomination list, which we are going to be discussing here shortly. So we're going to introduce the committee. We're going to do an overview of some of the resources, including a new Red Clover website, which is really exciting. And then the committee will go through all the books in the list. And then we'll talk about some of the books that didn't quite make the list, but were very interesting and folks want to share. And then there'll be plenty of time for questions at the end. So as we go through, please put questions in the chat and we'll try to address them at the end. So the committee, this year's committee, who are going to be presenting to you today, we have Abby Adams, Valerie Bang-Jensen, Kara Clopton, Hannah Feld, who is the committee chair, Abby Johnson, Tessa Johnson, Leaf Perry, and Joyce, who is not able to be with us today. And with that, we will turn it over to the committee chair. We'll turn it over to Hannah to review the Red Clover website, which is awesome. Really exciting.
Thank you, Jonathan. So as a committee, we have a bunch of both teachers and librarians, school librarians on the committee, and we have talked a lot about what is the best way to present the resources that we want to share with everyone that we work all summer to create after we select our new nominees. And we had previously created a handbook that was a PDF document that could be accessed through the Department of Library site, but we wanted to have a resource that was a little more alive because we see all of the amazing things that you guys make and share throughout the school year on the VSLA listserv and on the Vermont Children's Librarian or Youth Librarian listserv as well. And we wanted to just make sure that those resources were being shared in a way that anybody could access them in addition to what we create. And so as a committee, we decided to create this website. I am going to share my screen here. So this is the new Red Clover Book Award handbook website, so distinct from the site that the DOL maintains for us. And so on this site, you can see just sort of the basic homepage with the overview of the history and past winners. You'll see the same video that the Fan Brothers made for us on the past winners site. And then we have a page for each of this year's nominees. And on each page, you'll see the same categories that we used when we created that handbook that was a PDF document. So it has the brief blurb written by a committee member, a picture of the cover. It has discussion questions. I don't know why my text is looking like this. Discussion questions for each book and a vocabulary section for words that might be challenging or that you need to explain to kids as you're reading. We have a section of video content which has direct links, which is kind of nice, so that you can just have this site and open them up from there as you're teaching, as well as whatever publisher content has been created for that book. A few suggestions of activities, and you might notice that we've sort of scaled back how many activities we're suggesting, just because we recognize that the amount of time that we can dedicate to teaching the Red Clover books is limited. So we really went for choosing the best, strongest activities that we could think of. And then just a little bit of information about the author and illustrator of each book and some suggested companion books for each one. So I won't go through each page on this, but I do think that I'm hoping that this site will be a really excellent resource. And again, if you do create more content for one of these books as you're teaching them, please do send it to us, as we would really love to include it on the site. So Tessa Johnson is going to be our web manager. And so it would be really wonderful if you could share that with us if you do create some additional resources. So I will end my screen share here. And we can move on to share the titles.
Yeah. No, we were really excited to move to, again, like Hannah was saying, it's something we've kind of been talking about, and all of the book award committees are sort of like going in that direction to to have something that is more of a website rather than just a static book, like a PDF. And then it also is something that would be able to be made available earlier, and then the committee can continue to add content to it. And then also, always looking for ways to try to capture what all the amazing work that folks not on the committee are doing, which can be a challenge. But again, there's information on the website about, basically share it to the VSLA listserv, or to the Department of Libraries Youth Services listserv, and we will try to capture it and get it up on the site. So let me just have to continue to plug the website because it's exciting. Let me get the PowerPoint back up. Okay, so now we are going to be presenting each of the nominees, the 2022-2023 nominees. We're going to start with Someone Builds the Dream by Lisa Wheeler and Lauren Long, presented by Tessa.
Hello. I have Someone Builds the Dream. Everyone knows that the big picture people, the inventors, the discoverers, the authors, the geniuses behind the coolest things. But behind every big dream is an even bigger team of people who make that dream a reality. This beautiful book, written by Lisa Wheeler, tells the story of those people. With simple rhyming prose and a repeating catchphrase, Wheeler highlights the importance of all the people behind the scenes who make things happen. So I'm going to show you some of the pictures. Well, for one thing, notice the park here. That's going to come back later. Here it says, an architect creates a space. She'll draw, redraw, measure, and trace a woodsy, warm, and peaceful place. But someone works to guide the saws, plane the logs, and lead the team. Oh, I should show that page too. Someone needs to pound the nails. Someone has to build the dream. Over the course of several pages, you'll see the architect's plan for the house, the loggers cutting down the trees, the millers milling the logs, the diggers clearing the land. They're laying the foundation, the construction crews framing the house, the landscapers, the plumbers, the roofers, the electricians, and all the people involved in building that woodsy, warm, and peaceful place. From houses to bridges to fountains to water to windmills to roller coaster parks to books, Lauren Long's beautiful and detailed illustrations show readers how many people are involved in the myriad jobs necessary to build the dream. Long fills the pages with vivid color from edge to edge, showing laborers in all stages of work on each project. I really love the book because it highlights the skilled laborers and tradespeople who are so important in this world. We often focus our attention on the idea people, the inventors and creators, but we fail to notice all the other people involved in the everyday projects. I think many students will be able to see themselves and their families in this book. Children will also enjoy the depths of the illustrations and the many details in the foreground and the background. I'm going to just show you another. They're kind of each in sets. This is somebody building the dream. This here is one I really like a lot, though. It's the architect who designs, I guess it's an artist, my bad. It's an artist who designs a fountain. And you can see they painted the picture and they're modeling it with clay. And then you can see the people here. You have somebody putting up the framing for the concrete. You have people doing soldering, people laying plumbing, people digging. Over here, you have people like smoothing out the I don't even know what that is. Cast iron elephant, whatever the elephant's made out of for the fountain. You have people laying the pipes. You have people like, I don't know, doing the plumbing stuff and putting down the paving stones. So there's all this detail and all this work that goes into it. This book is also one whose cover illustration is different than the dust jacket. And I don't have mine separated. I heard a cool trick from the committee, but you can see it's kind of different here. But somebody said that you can just not tape down these two corners and just put a little bit of Velcro here, and then you can undo it and you can see the cover, and then you can Velcro it closed. I thought that was cool. I'm going to do that next time I get one of those books. And one other thing you can talk with the kids about is the park at the beginning. You see at the beginning, it starts out with this like rundown thing. And when you get to the very end of the story, it shows this beautiful finished park. I was actually hoping that it would show like all the things in here, like the new house and like the roller coaster in the background, but it doesn't, it just shows the park. But that could be a discussion point with kids when you get to the end of the story, like what kind of people were needed to make that park. On the new Red Clover resource website, there are links to videos about how the idea for the book came to be. There's a time-lapse video of a house being built. There's read-alike books, and there's a bunch of other activities and discussion questions. As a read-aloud book, one that's very popular in my library is the book If I Built a House by Chris Van Dusen. In that story, a boy imagines a wild dream house that he would build if he could. I often pair that with a drawing activity where the kids imagine their own dream houses. I think you could take that a step further and pair it with the story as well for a discussion about who would be needed to actually build such a wild house. Another activity could be to have students working in small groups design a dream project like a house or a theme park or a fountain. And then they could swap with another group to discuss what tradespeople would be needed to make that dream project a reality. Our second grade team does a project each year where they design and build a community using paper and craft materials. This book could tie in nicely with a project like that too, to discuss who would actually be building that community. So yeah, check out the new Red Clover resource website, and it has lots of ideas and videos and resources. All right, I'm done with mine.
Thank you, Tessa. My camera was being weird. Yeah, thanks for showing the book and all of all those fantastic ideas along with it. I gotta pop it up real quick, but Kara has the next one. All right, so the next book is Mel Fell by Corey R. Tabor, and Kara is going to be presenting it. Take it away, Kara.
Terrific. Hi, friends. Thanks for joining us today. I get so excited to talk to other teachers and librarians and book lovers, and this Mel Fell is absolutely one of my favorites that's on this year's list. I think it's because it's about a courageous little bird and a bird that has siblings. And I don't know if any of you have brothers and sisters that you like to push around, but this book really makes me feel happy. I like the topsy-turvy nature about the book as well. And you'll notice that as I'm showing you some of the pages, you have to turn the book around, which kind of mimics the way that this bird is diving into the water. What's fun too, on our handbook website, you can watch pictures of actual kingfishers diving down into water and grabbing a fish, and it's remarkable to me. I know that will really bring some joy to a lot of your students. Mel Fell. I already have to turn the book a wonky way, which makes it really appealing to me. So Mel lives in a tree. Actually, let me show you the back. Lives in this big, super tall tree, and you can see some of the other characters, the other critters that we're going to meet. And way up here at the top is Mama Bird and Mel and Pip and Pim, Mel's siblings, the brother and sister. So here's our tree. I'm starting off kind of sideways, and we can see Mama Bird is looking down at the nest. And here goes our plucky little courageous bird stepping out on a limb while the siblings back here were like, I don't know what you're doing, but that looks really dangerous. One day when Mama was away, Mel decided it was time to learn to fly. She'd been in the nest long enough. So here she goes. Takes a look down, down, down. It's a really long drop. Today's the day for sure. And off she goes. And I really love this Olympic dive here we've got going on. Oh, she's got such grace, such flair. And kaboom, down she goes with incredible speed. We meet a lot of characters along the way, many of whom are feeling really worried about this plunge. We've got the owl family here as she descends. We have a series of squirrels shouting out things like blast, aye, nuts, oof, as she goes down. And then we have the bees, of course, who say, Zizel, Zazu will save you. We've gone all the way through a spider web, and luckily we've let loose this little fly here. I'm free! The spider's trying valiantly to help. And we get to my favorite character. I have to read this particular page 3 or 4 times in a row because the kids think it's an absolute riot. Here's a slug who says, do not fear, helpless little bird. I will catch you, which of course makes everyone roar with laughter. She continues on her path. Oh no! And splash. The first time I read this, I didn't even know what a kingfisher was, so I didn't know what was going to happen. I thought she was going to bonk her little beak, and a lot of your students will feel the same way. Oh, she's going in the water. Then we turn the page. So Corey tells us what to do as she's going underwater and catching that fish. And then you get a little trick up here, this way. And kaboom, up she goes with her catch. And I love to watch the expression on this very surprised fish. What kind of day is this going to turn out to be? Oh, let me turn the correct direction. I'm topsy-turvy too. There's our friend the slug. Ooh, we see all those characters again, the ants, and the spider who's spelled out, yay! We've got our friends, the bees, huzzah, huzzah! And those goofy squirrels and the owl family still just as surprised. Oh my goodness, what an ordeal. We get back to the beginning with Mama, and Mama is so proud, so excited. And then, oh, when you open your mouth and talk to your Mama, well, the fish falls out. So kids are pretty glad to see that happen, actually. I was too. We get a beautiful hug here at the end. I knew you could, said Mama. I knew I could too, said Mel. And then we have a nice little continued message from our friend the slug. Oh, this book makes me so happy. At the very end, you get an extra little treat because Mel is pushing those siblings. It's going to be their turn too. Melfell is a pure delight. Every class I read this with wanted me to do it again, Miss Clopton. I think your students will enjoy it as well. I have another title to share with you, and it's a title that I hope you picked up really quickly because it's a Caldecott winner, and also the illustrator is a fellow Vermonter. Watercress. This book absolutely is about cultural identity and how it shapes who we are, and reminds us to never forget where we're from and reflect on the stories, your family stories. This book is beautifully done. Jason Chen uses watercolor, and Andrea Wang, this is an autobiographical, semi-autobiographical story for her. She's sharing some experiences that she has felt growing up, and she wanted to be able to connect with other readers as well. So let me show you some of the artwork. What I love, this is a story about a family that's going on a little trip, and they live in rural Ohio where you see a lot of corn, and the parents in their little red Pontiac stop the car and ask the kids to hop out because they have seen some watercress on the side of the road. What I think is really beautiful that Jason's done, particularly on this page right here in the gutter, is he's figured out how to take that element of corn and then the bamboo plant and to go back into the memory of what the parents might have experienced. I think that's so artfully done. So reluctantly, the girl takes off her shoes and has to go out there in the weeds and get this weird plant. She's really hoping nobody sees her. This is so embarrassing. This is so strange and weird. Why are our parents making us do this? There's no way I'm going to eat this stuff. Then her brother, of course, is tormenting her. And she's got this soggy sack full of weeds. And she really hopes that they all just fall right through. Well, they head back to their home. Grumpy as ever at the dinner table. No, she doesn't want to eat this. She doesn't want to eat something that is free. You know, free is like when you get hand-me-down clothes, or free is like something you pulled out from like furniture that you might have on the side of the road, or getting your dinner from a ditch is definitely not something she's interested in. And at this point, there's a real turning point because the mom decides to share about her background. She talks about her brother, and she hasn't, the young girl hasn't really heard many stories about her uncle or about the family when they were living in China. So this spread right here, you can see such a difference between these two pages. And I like to just show it to kids for a moment and ask them the things that they think are different. What's missing? How has the mood changed? And she talks about how they would eat together. And then during the famine, and kids may not know what that means. I know some kids know exactly what it feels like to be hungry, but to go hungry for a long period of time. And you can see who's missing here at this bench. The first time I read the story, I was choked up. I was brought to tears. I think Chen does a really beautiful job, and Andrea's really sparse text right here, just exquisite. So the girl here thinks about things a little differently, and the shame she was feeling about eating something that was free, something from a ditch, that really turns around for her. And she says, I love this. I just love the wording here. I take a bite of the watercress. It bites me back with its spicy, peppery taste. It's delicate and slightly bitter, like Mom's memories of home. This book, I think kids will revisit again and again. Watercress, thank you so much.
Thank you, Kara. So next we have Stacy's Extraordinary Words by Stacy Abrams and Kit Thomas, presented by Valerie. Take it away, Valerie.
Thanks. So politically savvy adults will recognize Stacy Abrams as a former member of the House of Representatives, a current candidate for governor in Georgia, and a fighter for voter rights. But young readers will recognize a second grader enthralled with words. In fact, she loves them so much that when she encounters an especially notable one like monotonous or sesquipedalian, she enters them into her notebook that she calls Stacy's Extraordinary Words. Stacy has been skipped from first to second grade in the middle of the year, and when she feels shy, she takes refuge in words. And not only at school, but at home, she's just mesmerized by them. When she earns 100 on her first spelling test, her teacher, Mrs. Blakesley, a shout out to her real second grade teacher, asks her to be in the spelling bee. Readers unfamiliar with the concept of a spelling bee may imagine, as Stacy does, that it refers to a really smart insect who knows how to spell. In the handbook website, in the video part, we have a clip to a spelling bee chunk from the film Aquila and the Bee, if that will help your readers get a sense of what that is. But fairly autobiographical, the book follows her preparation for and her participation in the first spelling bee. Readers will see her getting ready in settings that they recognize: the lunchroom, the library, the playground, her bed, her backyard. She claims that words are her best friends and companions, and she delights in them. I mean, why use mistake when you could use blunder? Words also comfort her in the face of the other spelling bee candidate, a boy named Jake from her class, who has bullied her and her classmates. So although she makes it to the final round of the bee, and spoiler alert, she loses to Jake, who immediately and predictably gloats about it, she stands up to him and she remains a gracious loser. Her loving mother helps her to see that this is still a win. And in her author's note, we learned that she participated in 4 more bees before becoming the champ in 6th grade. So it's not hard to miss the messages thoughtfully offered in this book about bullying, the importance of winning and losing gracefully, perseverance, and the role that failure can play in future success. First-time illustrator Kit effectively conveys the schoolyard scenes, and she does a really good job of helping us be interested in words. They float across the page in bold, colorful print, sometimes in word bubbles, as Stacy enters them in her notebook or practices them for the spelling bee. And the book design adds some layers to the content as well. The front and back matter pages are on notebook lined, ruled pages. And in the back, they include a page that might be from Stacy's notebook that even has red circled around the words that she got wrong. So young readers might be interested in the author's note, where she offers a glimpse into how these facts from her life became a story. And you'll notice in the illustrations that the illustrator even got the pigtails just right. So it's easy to think about how this book could launch readers, writers, and classes in so many ways. You can start enjoying relationships with words by asking your students to have their own notebook of words they find extraordinary. You could even have one in the classroom or the hallway so that everyone reading this book could contribute. There are a lot of other books that it connects with. Max's Words, Little Red Writing, The Right Word, about Roger. This book invites students to play with words visually the way the illustrator does. Concrete poetry would be great here. It also would lend itself to an autobiography or biography unit. There are many other Black and BIPOC political figures that show how people grow up to champion certain causes. And the good news for everyone is that the sequel is coming out in December, and it's called Stacy's Remarkable Books.
Thank you, Valerie. That's awesome. I didn't know the sequel was coming. That's awesome. All right, so our next book is A Song of Frutas by Marita Engel, illustrated by Sarah Palacios, and presented by Hannah. Take it away.
Hannah, you are muted.
Thank you so much, because that's kind of funny what was just happening. Okay, ready? Mango limon, Coco, melon, naranja, toronja, plátano, piña. This book, A Song of Frutas, is the story of a little girl visiting her abuelo, her grandfather, in Cuba, where he is a frutero, a vendor who sells fruit. A pregonero is what they call it, a street vendor in English. It reads as a poem, and the author describes it as such in the back matter. Excuse me, it's dismissal at my school.
Buses 17 and 30. Buses 17 and 30 are here and are awaiting your arrival. Please walk down the hall until you are ready to board your bus. Bus 17 is with Mrs. D. Bus 30 is with Mrs. Field. Thank you.
I'm not actually out there right now for buses, but anyway, okay. So
Bus 30 is with Mrs. Disorda. I forgot Mrs. Field was not here this afternoon, so go to Mrs. Disorda.
That's hilarious.
Excuse me, guys. I'm sorry.
She forgot. We all knew.
Okay. So the author describes it as a poem in the back matter, and it has Spanish words interspersed with English in a natural way that the author calls Spanglish, and also conveniently provides a definition in context almost all the time. In some ways, it's an ode to these pregoneros and the songs that they sing in the streets to advertise their wares. And it also gives a very concrete sense of place. With the descriptions like the tamales wrapped in slick green banana leaves, and the cucuruchos, the pointy paper cones filled with mani, roasted peanuts that smell like the salty blue sea. I would highly recommend watching some of the video content that we included on the handbook site. With students to further contextualize and make this book come to life. We included a video news report about actual pregoneros in Cuba. And
attention, please, walkers and riders.
It's just going to keep happening through my whole book talk. I'm sorry.
Walkers and riders.
And also the song El Manicero, which was inspired by the song of a peanut seller and is referenced in the back matter of this book. Engel also shares the Latinx tradition of eating 12 uvas, or 12 grapes, at each stroke of midnight and making a wish for each one. If you do choose to use this book to talk further about New Year's traditions, I'd encourage you to use the example in the book as a jumping off point and then share your own traditions rather than appropriating this particular one. If you're lucky enough to still have Spanish offered at the elementary level in your school, this book is such an amazing collaboration opportunity. It begs for a study of Cuba and the culture, for Spanish language work on buying and selling, or on frutas y verduras, fruits and vegetables, or looking further at traditions in Latin America. At its conclusion, the book deals with the travel restrictions for Cubans in a delicate way, sharing the girl's wish that her grandfather could someday come visit her in the United States. The back matter addresses those restrictions in a little more depth. And it also shows how they keep in touch when she does go home with abrazos de palabras, or hugs made of words sent across the ocean through the mail. This could be a nice connection with The Lost Package, our other nominee that deals with the Postal Service this year, and perhaps it's an opportunity to base a larger project on connecting with another school about these books, either as pen pals or through a postcard exchange. Throughout the book, Sarah Palacios really brings the story to life with her bright palette of colors that feels as tropical as the island setting. Her characters are somewhat cartoony with really simple facial expressions that clearly convey emotions. The pictures feel busy, but not crowded.
Your attention, please. Mr. Nelson, could you please come to the front office? Mr. Nelson.
And the pictures also smooth the shift that feels somewhat abrupt as they the story transitions from Cuba to the United States. I hope you all have a lot of fun reading this one out loud, and make sure that you practice your frutero song ahead of time so you're ready to belt it out, as Margarita Engel says, as powerful as an opera star's glorious voice. So here's mine one more time for inspiration. Mango limon, coco melon, naranja toronja, plátano piña. Thank you.
Thank you, Hannah. And well done rolling with the the announcements. All right, so next up, we got a tie-in. I'm talking about the Postal Service. Next up is The Lost Package by Richard Ho, illustrated by Jessica Lannon, and presented by Leaf. Take it away, Leaf.
Hello. So just in time, I stopped at my post office and they were so generous to give me some props for today's presentation. Anybody, of course, can get a priority mailbox, but you have to really sweet talk them to get a uniform, even the official uniform. So anyway, I just have to enjoy this. I have to give it back, of course. So in talking to our post office, I found out that they had no idea that the Lost Package was an award book this year. And that person I talked to also had no idea that Oni the Mail Pouch Pooch was a previous Red Clover winner. So it just highlighted to me how it would be really nice for us all to reach out to our post office in town and make some kind of connection. Because of course, we can do a lot of collaboration with them if we make the effort. Okay, so while the text is sparse, it's a full story with beautiful watercolor illustrations with the spacing of the text. There are so many details added in that you can notice either on a first reading or on a reading. You can ask kids to be looking for them, but not only do you hunt for things in the illustrations, but also under the dust jacket. But I'll make you wait to see what's actually there if you hadn't seen it already, okay? Basically, in the story, we see a care package being packaged. We don't know what's inside it. We get some little clues as we go. And it goes, oops, sorry, went too far. It goes through all the steps of being sorted at the mail distribution center, which I found out the one that our mail here in Cambridge goes to is Essex. There's another one here in Vermont, White River Junction. So pretty much all the mail goes through one of those two locations to get sorted before it gets delivered. That's where they get their barcodes. We see all the different steps in here, and this is actually happening in New York, the state of New York, and likely in the city of. And as we see it go through the conveyor belts, now we see it's going to be heading to a truck to go to JFK, one of those nice little details in there. And then as it's driving, it encounters a pothole, a nasty pothole that Vermonters are very familiar with. As it bumps, the package is broken loose and goes out the back of the truck. It flew, but that's not the end. It's left on the side of the road until somebody very special finds it. Here it's where it's lost. It's this tiny little thing in the big city of New York. The special one that really finds it is the dog, because he wouldn't let it go. He dragged the human over to it. So now the package has finally been found. Fortunately, it's still legible. They know where it's supposed to be headed. And the next scene we see is them in a moving van. Hopefully, we hope that the box is with them because they've got lots of boxes. And it says, like all packages, this one was sent with hope that neither snow, nor rain, nor heat, nor gloom of night will keep it from being delivered. No, all those are typically the post office's famous words. In this story, it's the family that ends up delivering the package right to the doorstep of the family to receive it. The kids go and open the package, read the letter together. The parents are talking over some coffee probably. And the cycle continues where the child is writing a new letter and packing a new box to send. And some of the details, like here, you see NY and the Empire State Building. If you hadn't noticed it already, or if the kids hadn't noticed it already, you might flip back to the front or even on the title page to see that detail. So there are little hints, little nuggets throughout the book that give you some clues as to where it's going and where it's coming from. And it ends with the two kids mailing the new package together. So now, what you've been waiting for, of course, under the dust jacket is the actual package. And it even has the address, legible enough. So we learn the names of the kids in the story. It was being mailed to Jack in San Francisco, California, and it was coming from Zoe and most likely Brooklyn. So we get lots of little clues from throughout the book. It's a nice battered package, but still deliverable. This book has so many different connections, so many different things we can do. You can literally enter the package address into Google Maps and find a real place. Well, kind of. You end up in an alley. So the address is not a true address, but there is really a street in San Francisco with that. So we could talk about maybe the privacy issues on why they picked a fake address to be able to use. There could be lots of discussion about that. And there are other things you can do about the locations, this Brooklyn Bridge, the Brooklyn Bridge, and the Golden Gate Bridge was featured in there. You can get into weights, like talking about light packages versus heavy packages, how it impacts the cost. I definitely learned pretty quick if I'm going to send something to Canada, once one of my friends moved there, that I need to send light things because it creates a huge extra price in your package. There are lots of videos linked on our website that show you different parts of the process. There's some really good videos of showing all the mail getting sorted at Christmas time. And that, I think the most local one I could find was in New Hampshire. We can also do things about stamps. If somebody collects stamps in your community, or if you do, or if you can do something about that. These stamps were lent to me. They're actually magnets. And right as I'm talking, the mail is getting delivered to my house, which is kind of funny. But they lent me these little magnets, and their magnets are usually used at the desk to show people what stamps are actually available right then. This is a snowy day, and we've also got one of the Giving Tree. The Giving Tree wasn't available at my post office when I stopped in. But in the past, they've also done one for Oni the Mail Pouch Pooch, what some of you remember as being an old Red Clover. Would be a great companion book for this, or even just to highlight it after reading it. Another one that would be really good is Boxes for Katya. This other old Red Clover book is all about sending care packages to people in a war-torn country. So obviously we have many places we could be sending things like that. There are lots of service projects that are mentioned on the website, whether it's letter writing, postcards, or care packages. You could do something like Hannah mentioned and have a pen pal school and maybe send things that represent where you live. And that's what they were doing in the story. They were sending things that represented where they lived to their friend that was far away. And I do that with a friend in Texas all the time. The default is always our own state, but if we've traveled places in the last year, then we'll try to get some little things that represent those places to send each other. Of course, you could also do a flat Stanley project and mail things around. Another one of the books that's mentioned on the website is The Day the Crayons Came Home. And that's got postcards that are being sent to let them know where the crayons ended up. Your post office can be a real resource. They not only lent me these things, but they also had Meet the Wonders of America. And they said, oh, you can photocopy some of the pages out of that. So there are different stamps in there and activities. Don't be surprised if you don't find that at your post office. They said it was from 2006 and a lot of the places don't have it anymore. But I think it's definitely worth it to talk to your local post office for the town, either what you work in or where you live, and to actually find out where the mail goes and how it gets sorted, so you can let your students or your readers know about it. Something that I found pretty interesting was if I'm mailing a letter at the post office and it's a local in-town letter, it could still go to Essex and get sorted and sent back to my town unless I hand it in at the counter. If you hand in your mail at the counter, they'll hand cancel it and sort it to be delivered. If it goes in one of those slots, it gets mixed in with all the other ones and sent down to Essex or White River Junction, depending where you are, and barcoded, sorted, and brought back, even though it was already in its destination town. So something to consider for you in the future. So there's lots of really fun things you can do with this. Enjoy it.
Thanks, Leaf. We got before we started, she let the committee know that she had acquired something from the post office, and we were all we didn't know what, but I love the idea of going and talking to your local post office and letting them know about the book and seeing ways to tie in. I don't know if you're all going to get a uniform, but I like that. All right. So our next book is I Eat Poop, a dung beetle story by Mark Pett and presented by Abby. Take it away, Abby.
Hi, everyone. So this is a book that is one of my favorites on the list this year. It is also one that you might be a little bit nervous about doing with your kids. And so because it features the word poop, right, which is still comic gold in the K4 set. But I encourage you to introduce it the way that I'm going to introduce it to you, which is with the back cover. It says, a dung beetle, a lunch, an extraordinary revelation. And we see Dougie the dung beetle hiding his lunch under the rock. It's a great opportunity to introduce the word dung as the scientific word for poop. I Eat Poop is on the surface a book that seems like just another school story, but it has a lot of depth to it as well. It starts out and takes place in one day with Dougie the dung beetle at home with his family, getting ready for school. But when he gets to school, we find out that this school for bugs is not as friendly as we would hope. And he is worried about other kids finding out that he is, in fact, a dung beetle. He feels a deep amount of shame and embarrassment about this part of his family and his family history, even though his dad does a good job of telling about famous dung beetles and the important part that they play in the environment. Well, the story turns one day when Mr. Longlegs is startled by a student, and Dougie is able to save the day. I love this two-page spread, the way that the text and the illustrations work together to tell like a little moment of the pill bug rolling out of control. Dougie leaps on top and, just as dung beetles do in the wild, skillfully brings his teacher to a halt, stopping the chaos and becoming, for the first time, a popular kid in school. He's feeling for the first time some pride about his life and skills as a dung beetle, although nobody at school knows that he is a dung beetle. We then flash back to his best friend, the housefly, the only other kid at school who eats poop. And we see that the lunchroom, Dougie is invited to sit with the popular bugs, but he's not eating anything. Well, at recess, he decides to go and retrieve his lunch, but somebody spies him and they find out that the lunch contains poop. This part will be especially hilarious to your students. It's a lovely detail that Dougie's lunch features pudding and a poop bar and poopy juice. Dougie doesn't own up that the lunch is his, and these popular bugs suggest that he goes and dumps the lunch over the head of his only friend, the housefly. This moment of drama, I think, really taps into some of the drama that plays out on our playgrounds and our schools throughout the state. It feels very high stakes in this moment. The illustrations are done digitally, and one of the things that the artist uses is some of the bugs are rendered more blurrily than others to kind of draw your focus. It's very subtly done, but it's sort of like how framing in a film might be done in order to highlight the character in the foreground. So, dun, dun, dun. The suspense of this moment with this large spread here. Will Dougie dump his lunch on his only friend's head? No, thank goodness. He owns up to it, and in front of everybody, takes a bite of his sandwich. We're not sure what's going to happen, but this picture of the menacing bugs circling around him will lead your students to believe that something terrible is going to happen. But then at a true I am Spartacus moment, a praying mantis second grader says, "So my mom ate my dad." And now everyone at the bug school is revealing weird bug facts. So that by the end of the book, we realize that Dougie is not alone, including the popular bugs, also weird bug facts. Dougie is not alone. They're all a school of weirdos and with their own unique traits. So what on the surface is a very silly book and kind of a normal school story is about that turn from shame and pride, thinking about your family culture, thinking about what seems normal in your house, and you might worry might be made fun of at school. It also is full of real bug facts and is a perfect book for explorations on bugs. The end papers feature a yearbook style spread of all of the bug characters from the school with all of their great and hilarious names. And then at the end of the book, we see the same spread, but now there are these weird bug facts underneath. So for example, Gareth Grasshopper is in track and field and has ears on his belly. This story, I think, is a real crowd-pleasing one. It's one that really lends itself to read aloud. It has a lot of companion books that you could use with it, and it's a great jumping off point for talking about things that are normal in your family, but that might make you unique. I love this book, and I encourage you to read it with your kids with joy and abandon. And there's some great video material on our website as well. So there are some videos of dung beetles actually creating their balls and some information about how they use the stars to navigate in the position of the sun to navigate where they're going. So there's a lot there on the website to expand your work with this book, and I hope you enjoy it with your students. Thank you.
Thanks, Abby. All right, our next book is The Floating Field by Scott Riley and Nguyen Quang and Kim Lien, presented by Hannah.
All right, I feel so lucky that I get to talk about this book because I literally love everything about it. It is a true story for which the author, who is American, interviewed Prasit Hemin, who's one of the original members of the Pawnee Football Club and is the anchor character for this story. The story is told as a classic sports arc with a group of plucky kids living in a floating village who find a way where there is none. So the story is set in 1986 in the floating village of Koh Phangan in Thailand, where the boys wait impatiently for their few opportunities to play soccer when a nearby sandbar is exposed by the ebbing tides. Eventually, they decide to form their own team. And as a team, they need a place to practice and play. So they build their own field so that they can practice every day. They cobble together this field from salvaged materials. And when it is done, they play all the time, right? The field itself forces them to become better players because of its small size and its inconsistent surface from the salvaged materials and the water on all sides that they have to stop the ball from going off into. The culmination of this story is when the boys find out about a tournament happening on the mainland and go to play. And the whole village bands together to send them off by purchasing matching uniforms for them. They play really well in the tournament and win several games until it begins to rain, which really rains on their skills and their attitude as well. And they take a little bit from their experience playing on their floating field and take off their cleats and their socks and play barefoot and really get their stride back, just as they do at home. And in the end, they do lose, but they come in third place in this tournament. And the biggest victory that they win is that they can continue to play soccer whenever they want back at home on their very own floating field. At the end of the story, the author's note and the back matter provide more context for this story, including maps that help students locate Thailand in the world and photos from the village, as well as a note from Prasit Hemin directly in his words, and a Vietnamese vocabulary of soccer words, none of which unfortunately are used in the story. There's an ample bibliography with some really great resources and videos that are worth looking at. We did include several of these links in the handbook, but not all of them. One extension idea for this book is to look more at soccer and football and how it connects people as the most popular sport in the world. In this bibliography, there's an amazing photo story from the Atlantic that shows soccer fields around the world. And it's also linked on our handbook site. And the floating field in Koh Phangan is one of the fields listed in that. I personally, when I saw this book, was especially excited about the illustrators, Nguyen Quang and Kim Lian, because I loved another book that they wrote and published last year, which was called My First Day, about a boy in Vietnam traveling to school on his first day via canoe. Nguyen and Kim are Vietnamese, and this book is set in the neighboring country of Thailand. So their style, especially for illustrating water, really communicates a dramatic sense of place. I mean, just like, look at that water. Wow. I love how full of movement their illustrations are. You know, as the things move around, it's just amazing. These bold outlines and organic shapes and really saturated colors. I think just these pictures of playing soccer in the rain and the way that they capture that movement is really amazing. They use these fine liner pens and Photoshop to color their illustrations. And there's a video where Nguyen and Kim share their process. that's included in the handbook site resources, and they speak in Vietnamese throughout the video, and there are English subtitles. So if you're watching it with non-readers, you would have to read what they're saying out loud. But I think everyone should watch it themselves, even if you don't watch it, share it with students, because it's just amazing to see these images come to life and to see a collaborative process of two artists and hear their personal connections to this story and why they were excited about working on it. So I hope you also use this book as an opportunity to get your students moving, perhaps getting outside, playing some soccer and practicing your fancy footwork. And I really hope you enjoy reading it with your students this year. Thank you.
Thanks, Hannah. Next up is the Capybaras, presented by Abby Adams.
Hi, yes. So the Capybaras is a beautiful spare story that starts out with this very evocative sentence: "That was a safe, agreeable place." The story starts out with a chicken coop and chickens. Everybody knows what life is like in the chicken coop. And there was plenty of food and nothing out of the ordinary ever happened. So your students will notice that something out of the ordinary, perhaps, is happening. There's a chicken being taken away by the farmer. There's a very skinny dog behind the fence. But to the chickens that live here, this is totally normal, and they're not bothered by it at all. But one day, something totally out of the ordinary happens. The capybaras come. As we saw in the beginning, the chicken coop borders on a wetland, and the capybaras are escaping the hunters who are hunting them in their wetland home. They are not welcomed by the chickens. They're too big, too hairy, too wet. But they were allowed to stay as long as they followed some rules. Don't make any noise, don't come out of the water, don't come near the food, and don't question the rules. The next couple of pages are wordless, and the author illustrator does a beautiful job of telling this story without any words. The story of how the youngest of us sometimes discover friendship very easily. But of course, the chicken mama freaks out and gives the capybaras a talking to. Generally speaking, these capybaras don't have a lot of facial expression, but look at the little one right here. There's something sad and disappointed about the set of its ears. They are wild animals. Well, we have another wordless spread. The chick gets itself into trouble. The vicious dog chases it. Its little capybara friend rescues it. And the whole family defends the little chick against the dog. And this is, of course, the turning point in the book. And after this point, things look very different in this chicken community. They decide to welcome the capybaras in, both during the day and at night, and that their community will be stronger together. So at the end of hunting season, the capybaras are getting ready to leave. The hunters return home. Their hunt hadn't gone well. And when they get home, they notice that the chicken coop is empty too, and no one knew what happened. But at the end, we can see that the now stronger community of chickens and capybaras have decided to move to greener pastures where they meet some sheep. I love this book because it is so spare. There's very little text. The illustrations are done in pencil with these pops of color. There's a lot that the author illustrator has done that's very clever. The coloring on the chicken coop matches the way that the chickens are rendered. So the red roof of the chicken coop echoes the red comb of the chickens. The tall grass of the wetlands looks like the dense fur of the capybaras. This is a story about refugees. It's a story about community and how it can resist or welcome change and what that might mean. It's a story about judging somebody by what they look like rather than by how they act or who they are inside. So there's a lot to go into with this book. In the Red Clover website, we have also included an amazing link to a website where some people who have chickens and capybaras as pets show that capybaras and chickens, even though in most of the time they live in very different environments, they love each other. And there are some very sweet videos of giant capybaras and the chickens who love them. So there is a lot to connect with this book, and I hope that you will explore it with your students.
Thanks, Abby. All right. Up next is The Midnight Fair by Gideon Sterer and presented by Abby Johnson. Go ahead, Abby. Oh, you are muted. Oh, except my dog's barking. I will mute now.
Okay, thank you. Hi, everybody. So this is our last book on the list, and we're going from one book that's pretty spare with text and lots of wordless spreads in the Capybaras to a totally wordless picture book in the Midnight Fair. It is definitely not spare, though. It has tons of color, and let me take you through it. So this is the Midnight Fair. Gideon Sterer, who's the author, said that when he was growing up, he always wondered about the fairgrounds in his town that would come to life just once a year when the county fair arrived. He wondered what the animals in the surrounding woods thought of this spectacle, and if they, ever checked it out themselves. I've got to adjust my camera here. Okay. The Midnight Fair may be the result many years later of these wonderings. This wordless picture book, illustrated by Maria Chiara Di Giorgio, is magical. It's full of scenes that will seem eerily familiar to your students. After the humans leave the fair, the woodland animals wait for their turn to try out the rides, games, and food booths. The scene is set here right from the end papers as we see the animals peering into the field as the pieces of the fair arrive. The animals are watching and getting ready. And here we see them in the dark. And so many of these illustrations, all of them, are playing with light at night, including the light in the animals' eyes. So we see them waiting for their turn. Then the people clear out. The coast seems clear, and a pair of raccoons flip on the lights, bathing the scene in a neon glow. The book alternates between double page spreads, allowing the readers to take it all in and enjoy the scale, especially of the big rides. We've got the teacups and the boat ride, the carousel. These are all beautifully done, big double page spreads. The swings, there might be a rabbit here not feeling so well, leaning over the side. And the cyclone, the roller coaster. So it alternates between these double page spreads and then comic book style panels, which give us vignettes and sub stories like the bear whose parent lugs around a giant prize teddy bear through the whole rest of the fair, or the squirrels who have gotten their heads stuck in a pretzel, and a coyote who wins a goldfish as a prize. We also see flashes of nuts and mushrooms and flowers that the animals use as currency, and other ways that they mimic humans, such as holding up a leaf like it's taking a video as a cell phone, or taking a photo with their fingers. And DiGiorgio just perfectly captures the look of a human doing these things. So the animals are mimicking, like this is what we do, right? We hold up this thing and we point it at the thing, and that's what we do. So the sun starts to rise and the animals clean up and exit the fair through a hole in the fence. And the groundskeeper arrives to find a bucket full of flowers, nuts, and leaves, the thank you that the animals have left behind. He suspiciously looks around the grounds and finds nobody's there. Meanwhile, what looks like a quiet woods actually contains the after party, which is happening as the animals cavort around with all their special snacks and their prizes. Although eventually they crash from their sugar highs and settle into sleep. And the coyote ends our story by freeing the prize goldfish into the water. There's so much to talk about in this book. Many kids will, of course, recognize the sights and sounds of the fair, but there's also an opportunity to see things and talk about things from the perspective of the animals, and imagine other scenarios where animals may observe human behavior, or to think about what is the coyote thinking when releasing the fish into the water. What a strange thing to put an animal into a bag. Another one of the fun things about this book is that it's not the usual anthropomorphized animals that we find in so many other picture books. These are clearly forest animals trying on being human for one night, and then they go back to the forest at the end. I think that's what's most mysterious about the story, is thinking about, what do animals really think? Are they watching us? What are they capable of doing when we're not looking? And it all seems plausible in this story. There's many words that are scattered throughout the pages that could be fun treasure hunts for vocabulary, sort of similar to Stacy's Extraordinary Words. Rickety steps, tickets, French fries, hot dog, large, small, cold drinks, popcorn, cotton candy, cyclone. It's all scattered throughout. So Word of This Picture books can be tricky to present in a group setting, and Candlewick, the publishers, created a helpful educator's guide with ideas for engaging students around this book and other wordless picture books, which is linked on our handbook website. And there's also suggestions in the handbook website for projects like artwork that could be inspired by the books. You could have kids design their own roller coasters. For those who have not or will not have been on a roller coaster, there's a video that takes them for a ride on the Cyclone at Coney Island. You can also imagine doing some beautiful collaborations with an art teacher, doing artwork on dark paper and with chalk or oil pastels, figuring out how to render light at night. There's also a video of the Caledonia County Fair, our local fair, at night. And definitely make sure, if you have time, to give students a chance to get up close and reread and study this book, because it's full of new details and subplots that pop out with every reading. So that is The Midnight Fair. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Abby. All right. Awesome. So that concludes the list. Pop this back up real quick. So I think we're going to, if you have questions for the committee about anything that's been presented, go ahead and put them in the chat. But I think we will go ahead and go over some of the honor books, the ones that almost made it, that didn't. And I believe Leaf is going to present those books for us. I don't know if you want, do you want me to leave the titles up for this?
Sure, that's fine.
Either way, yeah.
So you'll see these titles on 3 different slides. We also have a one-page list that will get linked on the website or in the resources. It's not there yet. I double checked, but so you don't have to scribble everything down. But these were some of the books that people had come across and that we talked about and that we debated as far as whether or not to put them on the list. I'm going to make this really short so we have time for Q&A, but sometimes we had a similar plot on some of the books, you know, a theme that was already being represented on a book that we thought was a little bit stronger. In one case for More Than Fluff, there was a grammatical error at the end. The last page just kind of was jolting for some people. So that's how that one fell off the list. But we had a lot of, you know, good books, a lot of strong books, but we also were aware of the fact that at that point when we were making those list decisions that we needed to have a lighter list, also based on some of the feedback from some of our students. So some of the books here can have some pretty heavy themes that we didn't necessarily want to have to tackle this year, part of our recovery from everything that's been happening. So we've got Avocado Ass, Milo Imagines the World, The Little Wooden Robot and the Log Princess, Being a Tree, The Dirt Book, Room for Everyone, How to Apologize. On the next slide, there is Zonia's Rainforest, The Water Lady, How Darlene Arvisa Helps a Thirsty Navajo Nation, Once Upon a Time, There Was and Will Be So Much More, and Unbound, The Life and Art of Judith Scott, as well as More Than Fluff that I mentioned before. The Water Lady was really good as far as being a community helper. The woman that drives the bus to the tanker truck to around on the reservation brings water to her people that don't have plumbing of drinking water. And so they get a set amount of gallons that they're able to use. So this really highlights that not everybody in the US still has consistent access to clean drinking water. And so that could be a topic to get into, maybe not for your whole school as a Red Clover book, but as, you know, a grade study perhaps. So if we want to take the time, we're at 3:23. We were hoping to wrap up most of this pretty soon. So if
I don't see any questions, so I think we could share our
okay.
like 1 minute.
So Abby A was going to share about 2 of the books, The Little Wooden Robot and The Dirt Book.
Yeah. So The Little Wooden Robot and the Log Princess is something that I think is really special. It's a brand new fairy tale. And the 2 main characters, the Little Wooden Robot and the Log Princess, are created by an inventor and a witch, respectively. It's an amazing, like, epic adventure story that has a lot of connections to traditional fairy tales, like the Peach Boy or Thumbelina even. But I especially wanted to share it, and I encourage you to use it with students because of these 2 pages in the middle of the epic adventure. So along the way, the little wooden robot had too many adventures to recount here. And so in this 6-panel spread, we get these amazing story starters for your students. The Giant's Key, The Family of Robbers, The Old Lady in a Bottle, The Magic Pudding, The Lonely Bear, The Queen of the Mushrooms. To harken back to what Eric Fan said earlier this morning or this afternoon, it's like a story bullion cube. And I think that using some of these would be amazing with students. So then the little log princess also has her own set of adventures, too many to recount. The mischievous pixies, the dragon's egg, the feuding hunters, the haunted well, the enormous blackbird, and the baby in the rose bush. Anyway, I love this book. I think it is just a remarkable story, and I encourage you to have a look at it. I guess the other book that I was going to talk about was the Dirt book. I don't happen to have it with me, but it's a lovely book of poems. It's a nice companion to Mel Fell because some of the pages are, you know, this way rather than our traditional book way. And I thought it was a really excellent collection to help kids think about what lives under the ground. But I don't have it to show, sorry.
Then Abby J, you were going to share about Room for Everyone and Once Upon a Time There Was and Will Be So Much More.
So Room for Everyone is, it's just, so this is by Naz Khan and illustrated by Mercy Lopez, and it takes place on a Dali Dala. It was like a bus, very different than the buses that we know of here. This takes place in Zanzibar. It's just got a fantastic rhyming rhythm to it, and it's also a really fun counting book. Amazing illustrations. They're kind of sketchy and but really detailed and colorful at the same time. It's got a very international feel, and some there's a glossary in the back of some of the Arabic and Swahili phrases that are scattered throughout. And I love it because it's just joyful. It's just so much fun to read. And at the end, more and more people get on the Dali Dala, and at the end, they finally make it to the beach. And it's just such a great release at the end. Beautiful illustrations, wonderful text. So that's Room for Everyone. And then the other one that I have, should I jump onto this other one? Once Upon a Time There Was and Will Be So Much More?
Yes, please.
Okay, well, I'm here. If you're interested in doing bookmaking and talking about book design, this is fabulous. So this book goes in and out of time and space. And I'm just gonna, my camera, sorry. So it just starts big and it goes backwards and forwards at the same time. So you can see the pages themselves actually get smaller and smaller and smaller. And it's talking about time. And I'm just gonna back up and show you, like, it's actually different size pages. It's such a cool book. So many fun projects that you could do about bookmaking that could jump off of this one. So that's Once Upon a Time There Was and Will Be So Much More by Johanna Scheibel. Thanks.
Hannah, can you share about Unbound?
It'd be my absolute pleasure. I don't know, you probably are all already giant fans of Melissa Sweet, and if you're not, you should be. So Melissa Sweet illustrated this book, which was written by Joyce Scott and Bree Spangler, and it is the biography of Joyce Scott's twin sister, Judith, who's an artist who had Down syndrome and was born at a time when people with different needs were often removed from their families, right? So she and her sister were inseparable in their young life. And then Judith, the family never realizes that she's deaf, and she's taken away to live at a school, which doesn't really seem like a school to Joyce when she visits her twin. And so Joyce spends her life working to get reunited with her sister to have the resources to be able to support Judy's needs at home. And then finally finds an art program for her where she finds her voice as an artist and makes these like exquisite sculptures that Melissa Sweet reproduces in the illustrations, and even goes on to wrap herself in textiles. And it goes through the end of Judy's life. And it's just a beautiful story and a wonderful look at, very personal and wonderful look at that sister relationship and this incredible artwork that Judith Scott produced. So I hope you all choose to include that in your collections. And I think it would be a really wonderful book to work with your art teacher on and talk about like different media and the different ways that people can make art. It's a wonderful book. Thanks.
That's all we have, Jonathan.
That's it. That's awesome. You all did a really great job. What?
Look at us, it's 3:30. So
I know. Excellent work. Thank you all so much. I'm going to put an evaluation in the chat if you have a second to do that, and then we'll share out everything that we talked about, links to everything, and I will get up the honor list on the website too, and share that out. Oh yeah, everybody pop on their cameras. That's fun. And if anybody does have any questions, for those of the committee who are able to stick around for a minute, I'm sure that they would be happy to answer your questions if you have anything. You put it in the chat or raise your hand, and we'll I'll turn on your camera and you can ask questions. Oh, looks like we have one. Hold on a second. All right. All right, Kelsey, go ahead. Kelsey, did you have a question?
Sorry, I forgot to unmute.
Oh, no worries. I was like, I unmuted you, I think, but yeah.
I'm juggling bottle feeding the baby at the same time. So I love the website that you've created. I think that is an extremely helpful resource. And I love like you pair other books with it and you just have so many things. I work with the middle school and I'm kind of sad that I don't see the same thing for Golden Dome. Do you know if they're planning on building the same resource, or is that a Red Clover thing?
They are interested in doing something similar. As is the Green Mountain Book Award.
Yeah.
Go
and
ahead.
I think they do create resources. They still have the handbook.
Yeah, it's just
that it's more of a static PDF document, and our goal with the website is that we can add to it as people create things.
Yeah, and I think it's so user friendly that I now am finally kind of off of I have to teach every block schedule, so I get to collaborate with my teachers this year, and I'm trying to find creative ways to collaborate with them and have new learning experiences and all that stuff, and they would just love to use stuff from that website. So I'm hoping and eager that will come soon as well for a middle school level.
And I just wanted to give a shout out to Tessa Johnson, who is the person who built that website. So all of the committee members,
I would add.
Yeah, put together
It happened very quickly.
It was incredible. So we put together content, and it took us kind of a long time to put together our content, and it was like a week later, she had created this beautiful, well-organized, appealing, user-friendly website. So that is kudos to her and her skill set.
Yes.
I think too.
Yeah, thank you so much.
I think too, we were inspired too by people in the past that have done their own Red Clover websites. And so we wanted to say, you know what, how about the committee takes this on so that other people don't have to create their own unless they really wanted to, so.
So yeah, it's a really fantastic resource, and again, big props to Tessa for making it happen, to turning it from an idea into a real thing in a week. Really, it was pretty awesome. So, and again, but the other Vermont Golden Dome and Green Mountain Book Award are looking to go more in that direction. Although it may not be necessarily for this year's list, but for next year, I think they're all sort of looking to go more that direction. Oh, Leaf, were you saying you're muted? Oh, okay.
It looks like there's someone else that's
yes,
raising
there
a hand.
is.
I don't know how to make it so they can unmute.
Let me hold on just a second. Angela has a question. Go ahead, Angela. I believe, looks like you're maybe still muted, Angela, but you should be able to unmute yourself now.
I have family that just got home, so.
Oh, no worries.
Oh, I wonder if she's having connectivity issues.
That could be.
Angela, what's your question?
Are there any other questions for the committee?
I'm really excited to do the Thai soccer one because we always do a community dinner and we're getting back to that this year. And so our UA team is planning on using that because of course we want to have some Thai food along with it. So we still have to develop everything we're going to do, but I'm really looking forward to that.
Sounds awesome.
We were just so good. Nobody has any questions. Just comprehensive.
Well, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording and thank everyone. If the committee wants to hang out for a second, you can. Everyone who joined us today, we really appreciate it. The recording will be available soon. We'll make it. I'll send it out to everybody who registered, along with all the links, and we'll put stuff up on our website. Again, probably hopefully by Monday of next week, we'll share everything out. But thank you so much for joining us, and thanks so much for the committee and their amazing presentations and all your hard work.